Breaking news coming in right now. Srinivasan, BCCI chief N. Srinivasan has refused to step down. Remember, this is what headlines today had been telling their viewers as well, that this is exactly what is supposed to happen. He's refused to step down, only agreeing to step aside while an investigation is conducted. But what is shocking is that BCCI has offered to start disciplinary proceedings in the matter. What the Supreme Court has said now after today's developments is that we will have to think very hard about whatever is in the interest of cricket and law. Let's go across to my colleague Jaskirat Singh Bawa joining us over the phone line. He was at the Supreme Court at the hearing. Jaskirat, give us more details.
Well, the proposal that was given by the BCCI was not exactly explicitly read out in the court. However, the snippets that came out give us the impression that Srinivasan has actually seemed semi-defiant. What he's seeking in IPL terminology, you could call it a strategic timeout of sorts. What he's offered is not to step down, but to step aside and not discharge his duties as the BCCI boss in the interim period that the investigations are on, until the investigation and the probe does not get over. However, the Supreme Court has taken that proposal. Along with that, the BCCI has also offered other things about how they are planning to go ahead and implement some of the suggestions of the Mudgal committee report. But the Supreme Court, while taking these recommendations, said that we will think about this. We will go through the proposal, detailed proposal, and we'll have to think very long, very hard, and decide in the best interest of cricket and in the best interest of law. From the looks of it, it seems like this could probably go on for a few days. However, Justice Patnaik wants to take care of this matter before he retires at the end of the month.
So, as I understand, Jaskirat, this is the end of the hearing today. There could not be any more directives from the Supreme Court today, at least?
The case is actually ongoing right now as we speak. Harish Salve, appearing for the petitioners, is arguing the case right now on their merits against the Bombay High Court order. That argument is still going on, but as far as this particular proposal is concerned by the BCCI, because all eyes were on what the Supreme Court plans to do about Srinivasan after 48 hours ago, they asked him to step aside, step down for free and fair investigation. So as far as that aspect is concerned, it seems like the Supreme Court is going to take some time. The bench is going to take some time to deliberate over the proposal and come out with a clear thought, judicial thought, on what they plan to do about it. However, the arguments in the case are actually ongoing as we speak.
All right, so the arguments are still ongoing, but it seems as far as the matter about Srinivasan staying in his position or not is concerned, Srinivasan has managed to get more time. His lawyers have told the court, or the BCCI lawyers have told the court, that he will step aside while disciplinary proceedings are initiated in the matter, and basically the same as what happened last year. There's a deja vu sense right now. Let me go across to Boria Majumdar, consulting editor. Boria, this is exactly what happened last time in June.
This is exactly what happened, what headlines today said this morning. But there are certain differences here, Shivani, which you need to understand. And there are very crucial differences. One, there will be a CBI inquiry in all probability. This is not a BCCI appointed inquiry.
No, but Boria, we don't know that at this point of time. What we know is that BCCI has proposed a disciplinary proceeding. Wait a second, let me just complete what I'm saying. CBI inquiry has not been mentioned today. As I was speaking to Jaskirat, that is, the arguments are still ongoing. We don't know what the court will decide, whether vis-a-vis Srinivasan or CBI. What the BCCI has proposed is what I'm saying, exactly what happened last year, that they will initiate a disciplinary proceeding. They had a probe last year as well, and that he will step aside and not step down. Isn't that exactly what happened last year as far as the BCCI is concerned?
No, it's not the same. You've got to understand it is not the same at all. The BCCI had appointed an inquiry on its own. This year the arguments are being tabled in front of the Supreme Court of India. It is not the same at all. Whether it's a CBI inquiry or not, we don't know. There's no question. But the inquiry will have to be appointed by the Supreme Court of India. It will not be chosen by the BCCI. It will not be chosen by anyone concerned with Mr. Srinivasan.
All right, so let me actually confirm that with Jaskirat. Jaskirat, this disciplinary proceedings that BCCI says they will initiate, will this be Supreme Court monitored in, proceedings?
But that is not known yet because the proposal wasn't read out. Now that's an interesting bit where even the petitioner side was not given a copy of the proposal, and they were handed over a copy of the proposal right in front of our own eyes while the proceedings were on. Which is why the Supreme Court did not deliberate or discuss much on the merits of the pointers given in the proposal, because they want the petitioners also to go through it, and they themselves want to go through it before they actually go on and deliberate over the details of the BCCI proposal. The exact specifics not being known yet, only the snippets that came out have suggested that the BCCI has offered not only the implementation of many of the recommendations of the Mudgal Committee report in a manner of, let's say, get some sort of a leverage from the Supreme Court, but also offered to initiate the disciplinary proceedings as soon as possible. Now, whether or not they will be court monitored or not, we'll get to know once we get a look at the proposal, which we should as soon as the hearing today is over.
All right. Boria, we don't know so far, as Jaskirat saying, the proceedings or the hearing is still going on. But your initial sense is that this is still a big victory in some ways, or would you say that this is slightly disappointing?
I am not saying whether it's a victory or disappointment at all. I am saying this is not what happened last year, because there was no Supreme Court to mediate. So here the BCCI is having to go to the Supreme Court of India, which is the highest office. It's having to say this is what we propose. It is upon the Supreme Court to accept or reject. So to say that this is exactly what happened last year and the BCCI will once again, do what it happened and say everybody is exonerated is not correct.
No, but didn't the BCCI say exactly this last year, Boria? That's what I'm saying. The court accepts it or not is another point. But the BCCI said exactly this. We will do an inquiry and he will step aside. That's exactly what they're saying today.
No, the difference is, please understand, it is not about the victory or defeat.
It's in the Supreme Court. I understand that point. But what they have offered is the same.
Exactly. No, they will, this whole thing that we will appoint 2 judges, there has to be differences here. So whether it's about disappointment or a victory, we will have to wait and see after the hearing. In fact, I was interested in knowing from Jaskirat what Harish Salve was arguing about. Because look, when you are saying that you've heard one side of the story, please understand the case in perspective. What Jaskirat says was, the BCCI has placed before the Supreme Court saying Srinivasan has agreed to step aside. They have given a few proposals pending probe. This is exactly what we've reported all day. We've reported this morning. We've broken this news. We knew this is not new news for us. What is interesting is, what are the petitioners saying? Because even Harish Salve and the petitioners know this. Will the Supreme Court agree to that? Will the Supreme Court give a hearing to Mr. Salve and the other side of the law? Will they take their arguments into cognizance? So the case is not yet over. So when we say the BCCI have gotten time, when we say the Supreme Court has given Mr. Srinivasan, time, or he's bought himself time, I think we are stepping a little ahead of ourselves.
All right, I was saying that because the Supreme Court said we will have to think about it long and hard before we decide what we do. So the inference is they will think about this. This is not the end of the hearing today, as Jaskirat has just said. Let me also go across to Vedika, who has been tracking Srinivasan's movements. Vedika, what is the sense around you right now? You were tracking Srinivasan very, very closely, and the sense around you right now?
Well, he's still inside his house, Shivani, as we speak, but we were the first channel, and Boria will also back me up on this. We yesterday broke this news that is now being stated by the council inside the Supreme Court, that as far as N. Srinivasan is concerned, he will be stepping aside, he will not be stepping down. This, in fact, only throws up 2 options as we speak, and even Boria has mentioned this right now, that either he will be stepping aside, we'll have to wait and watch what the Supreme Court says about that, because the hearing is still on, and Salve is also contesting on part of the petitioner. But on the other hand, this also throws open the whole future and fate of the BCCI as we speak. As of now, if I can ask my camera person to just pan a bit, this is N. Srinivasan's house, and there is only media presence all outside as we speak, but not a word coming out of N. Srinivasan. The last interaction that he's had, or rather a fourth interaction that he's had, was with Headlines Today when I tracked him down to the temple. He in fact was trying to seek some divine intervention moments before the Supreme Court hearing began, and he refused to even tell us if he's going to step aside or step down, but his body language was extremely tense when we spoke with him.
Yes, absolutely. This is exactly what Headlines Today had been reporting since last night, in fact, that the Srinivasan camp has decided he doesn't need to step down right now. They will come come up with a proposal or a plan to suggest to the court and tell the court that he will step aside while an investigation is conducted. What the nature of that investigation is going to be, actually nobody knows at this stage. Our correspondent at the Supreme Court just told us that the hearing or the arguments are still on. There hasn't been anything announced or an order of sorts given on paper. This is the sense that they have picked up. This is what has happened. BCCI lawyers telling the court that he will not step down, he will step aside while the BCCI initiates some sort of a disciplinary proceeding. This is what they had been actually saying all along as well when the case was in the Supreme Court, because that's what their reply was to Mudgal panel's report as well. But Boria, Supreme Court saying, at least initially what we know right now, that we will have to think very hard about whatever is in the interest of cricket and law. How do you read that statement?
That's a massive statement, but before that, please punctuate what we are saying. In the BCCI rebut, there is no disciplinary point that's mentioned. In the 33-page rebut in the BCCI, what is mentioned is we will implement XYZ suggestions of the Mudgal panel. There is no suggestion of Srinivasan stepping aside, so that is Supreme Court pressure. There is no suggestion of a disciplinary probe conducted yet again. They are saying all of this has been done. Even if you see C.A. Sundaram's argument day before yesterday, he says, it's done. We have agreed to the Mudgal panel recommendations, so this case is almost done. That was the BCCI stand. Today it's a departure. The departure has been brought about by the indictment of the Supreme Court or the pressure put by the Supreme Court. Now to your question about what that means. Massive. The Supreme Court is not going to tell, or it has not told, that we are saying yes, you step aside and a fair probe will be conducted. Please remember, Shivani, that Harish Salve is now arguing. So one side of the arguments have gone on. The petitioner's side is now arguing. There's Mr. Salve, there's Mrs. Chidambaram. The Supreme Court will have to adjudicate only after it hears both sides of the story. Secondly, the point that you were making, and you are right, that when last year he stepped aside, there are certain evidences that this stepping aside means nothing. He stepped aside on 2nd June, he attended ICC meeting on 23rd. He attended a working committee meeting in Calcutta on 1st September. He attended a disciplinary committee meeting on 13th September. Now obviously, the Supreme Court will have to take cognizance of all of these actions of his from last year before they adjudicate and finally give an order. I am sure, I am hopeful, I am fairly confident that after Mr. Salve's argument, you will get some more deliberations. Whether observations or an interim order, we don't know, but you will get something. What was interesting from Jastirat, and can you please confirm this with him, he said Justice Patnaik is retiring at the end of the month. I don't think it is end of the month, I think it is end of May, and we'll want to resolve this case before that. That is massive. That we will have a quick resolution to this case very, very fast. But before that, you will perhaps have an interim order at the end of arguments by Mr. Salve and the petitioner's side.
Absolutely. That is what we are looking forward to, actually. Looking forward to a clearer picture from the Supreme Court. The arguments are still going on. This is just the initial, indications we've got after the BCCI put forth whatever it had to, its proposal of Srinivasan stepping aside and of initiating a disciplinary proceeding against in this matter. But what the big story here is the takeaway that, as everyone had anticipated, at headlines today had been saying for nearly 12 hours now, N. Srinivasan was not going to step down. He was merely going to tell the court that he will step aside. Rasesh Mandani is also joining us from Mumbai, from outside the BCCI headquarters. Rasesh, what is the sense that you are getting from within the BCCI? Srinivasan stepping aside and not stepping down. Is that going well with everyone?
Well, look, it's the best case scenario, Shivani, that the battery of lawyers of the BCCI that have been deliberating through the day yesterday have been able to come up with. The formula, the details that we gather is that Srinivasan steps aside, the board secretary Sanjay Patel takes charge of the hem of affairs, Srinivasan continues to remote control the board, he also becomes eligible to contest the elections next year, and also the fact there's also a proposal that we gather that he be allowed to continue to take over as the chairman of the ICC, and that there be no barring on that as well. It's the best case scenario they've come up with. How the Supreme Court responds to that, how the hearing transpire, whether we get an interim order will give us a sense, because remember, it's not just about Srinivasan. Srinivasan, there's a lot of money that's stake as well. Obviously, the game of cricket is is under the dock as well. There are a lot of stakeholders of the cash-rich IPL which are right now keeping their eyes on the proceedings as well. We do not know what will happen with the two teams who are under the scanner as well. We don't know if IPL will carry on this year as well. So all these elements would have to be looked at, and in that sense, how the court reacts to the proposal that BCCI has put forth, will decide the manner in which cricket will be run in this country in the next few months.
Yes, Bore, as we wait for a clearer picture from the Supreme Court. Supreme Court day before said that it's nauseating that Srinivasan is continuing in his chair, that you are, full of filth is what it said to the BCCI. Today, what the Supreme Court is also saying, that the onus is not just on N. Srinivasan, if I'm correct. It's saying that the onus is on the entire BCCI as a body. Under such circumstances and after saying such statements, do you think the Supreme Court will, maybe let up in intensity, for the lack of a better word?
What was the last point? Let up.
I'm saying,
what did you say?
Do you think that the Supreme Court will be okay with this proposal and let the BCCI then, let Srinivasan then only step aside after everything that it has said? And today also it's saying that, the entire BCCI is responsible for what is going on. People in charge are responsible.
It is very difficult to conjecture, Shivani, what the Supreme Court will say, but what I do think, and this is my opinion, is the Supreme Court is not going to buy into an argument that the BCCI conducts a disciplinary committee probe like last time.
Yeah.
So that's where the difference is. I don't think that's going to happen. I mean, very honestly, I really don't think that's going to happen. What can happen, realistically so, is the Supreme Court might appoint a national investigative agency like Mr. Manohar had said to Headlines Today yesterday, with the Justice Mudgal committee overseeing that investigation, clearly taking that investigation away from Mr. Srinivasan's hands, the BCCI's hands, because they have not done justice to the cricket fans since last year. So they'll take it away from them, and there, if that happens, where that whole issue of proxy or remote control is not there that Rashesh Mandhani was talking about, there they might give Srinivasan this point that okay, you step aside, but the investigation will be conducted by the CBI or a certain investigative body, and the Justice Mudgal committee will oversee. When the Supreme Court is saying that I will think long and hard in the interest of cricket and in the interest of the law, please note, those are very important words. Harsh words, sensitive words, hard words. So the BCCI will not be able to get away by giving us a charade like last year, where two judges exonerate everybody and say everything is hunky-dory. I really don't think that is going to happen.
I'm also getting another update, Boria, that Harish Salve, who's the counsel for the Bihar Association, the petitioners in this case, he's actually reiterating to the judge the nexus between Mayappan, Srinivasan and India Cements. So basically the arguments are going on that, this is a tight nexus and Srinivasan cannot be allowed to stay in his position. Whether he steps aside or not is not the point. I believe that is the argument that is being made in court.
You are making a very, very important point, and I want to put this on record on Headlines Today, that the petitioners will make this point. We broke this news yesterday about the Srinivasan camp. Let us break this news about the petitioners camp. They will say Srinivasan steps aside, every employee of India Cements will have to step aside from the BCCI. I am making this breaking thing on Headlines Today because the petitioners will argue that the whole proxy that Rashesh Mandhani was talking about is done from Chennai with employees of India Cements associated in several shape or form with the BCCI. So that is the point that the petitioners will argue in front of the court. It's not about Srinivasan. It's about his people. It is about how he establishes control, how he establishes proxy control. So there, that argument will absolutely be placed in front of the Supreme Court. So when the Supreme Court says we've got to think long and hard, they've got to note that there are multiple layers by which Mr. Srinivasan controls the BCCI, and only then will they pronounce an order.
Yes, important arguments going on in the Supreme Court as we speak. The initial information that we got was that exactly what headlines today had predicted, a proposal coming from the BCCI side that N. Srinivasan will only step aside, he will not step down, which in itself is brazenness of the highest order really, after all the comments that the Supreme Court made about him quitting his position and asked him to quit or they would be forced to pass an order. But what the BCCI came back with, as we had anticipated, was that he'll only step aside, he will not step down, and that the BCCI is happy to initiate disciplinary proceedings in the matter. Whether that cuts ice with the Supreme Court is what we are waiting to hear. Arguments still going on, but Harish Salve, for the petitioners in this case, making an argument, he's reiterating, in fact, is what our correspondent tells us, the nexus between Mayappan, Srinivasan and India Cements. That's an important nexus that they are saying cannot be allowed to continue, and as long as Srinivasan is at the helm, perhaps that will continue.